Welcome back to Conspired, where skeptics and believers come together to discover the truth.
Welcome back. So we've had a pretty good week and a half since we first aired our pilot, which was what day? Was it last?
I think it was last Saturday.
Was it last Saturday?
Yeah,
okay.
pretty
and
sure.
And then we released episode 1 Sunday.
Yes,
and then
the
episode
pilot
2
was
Thursday.
Saturday.
Wow,
yeah.
I cannot believe it's been that short of a time. It's crazy because we've been looking at our ratings and stats on our home-based podcast app, hosting app, Podiant, and we've had
a lot more subscribers,
way more notoriety than I thought we would end up with. So far, what it basically does is it kind of combines all of our listening apps and all of our downloads from various sources and kind of combines them to see who do we have listening, how many subscribers do we have, and that sort of thing. So with all that in mind, we have a total of 156 downloads just on our last episode about Stephen Avery. So I thought that was pretty good for a week and a half, man.
I know that you were like gung-ho about this podcast, and you asked me if I wanted to come in, and I was like, it could be fun.
It could be fun.
But I didn't realize it was going to go this big.
I think it interests people, man. I think that I started this out thinking that I'm the only one interested in this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's other people just as weird as me, I guess. I don't know. Not to mention we have a total of 65 subscribers. And if you are not one of them, please stop what you're doing right now. If you are on iTunes, Overcast, TuneIn, Stitcher, Google Play, any of these places, YouTube, stop what you're doing. Hit the subscribe button. It helps us out tremendously with getting this podcast out there. It helps our ratings go up. Does nothing but great things for this podcast in general.
And also, give us some comments. Let us know what's going on, what you like, what you don't like. Let us know on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram.
We have all of these social media websites where you can get regular updates about upcoming podcasts, topics, or sometimes we even do polls as to what you would like to hear next.
Yeah, those are mostly on Twitter.
Right, Twitter. Sometimes Facebook. But so I'm really happy with the way things are going. I'm really super pumped.
Like I said, I'm having fun with it.
The interest level is so...
I can't believe we have people in other countries. That's what really threw me off.
The farthest away, we have 2 listeners from Sweden. Hey, Sweden friends.
Yeah.
Awesome. Glad to have you. In the UK,
yeah.
And we got our Canadians. We got our several Canadians that are keeping up with us. So shout out to our Canadians. Mostly here in the US, though.
Yes.
So. It's weird, though, because our hometown, or the city where we live, we don't have, that's not our top listening place. So
how many did we have in our...
In our top list, in the place where we're from,
just in our hometown,
we have 50 listeners from where we are from. That's not the top listening source, though. The top listening source is listed as other on Podiant, and I'm not even sure where that is, but it's interesting to me that that's not the top listening source.
That is
weird.
So
thank you for everyone who is subscribing and listening already. We are so thrilled to be doing this for you guys, and I know I just can't wait for what's to come.
Yeah, each episode I'm just wondering, how am I going to handle my side?
How are you going to top me? That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
I am the conspiracy queen, pretty much. I don't really know why this podcast is called Conspire. It should just be called Natalie Loves Conspiracy Theories.
No.
We've had a crazy day, though, today. Really, it's always good to look forward coming home and doing this podcast, but...
Yeah, we were rushing around trying to get things done, what we wanted to get done today, just so we can come home
and do this. But something really funny happened today that I really wanted to...
She wanted to really tell this story.
So, we had lunch earlier talking about some things to do with the podcast, and as we were waiting on our food, we were sitting down in this restaurant, and this man comes walking in, and this woman comes trailing behind him, and she's got her hair up, got her sunglasses, got her bun up, and she's got this really heavy southern accent, and she's like, well, y'all have a blessed day, and don't be flicking people off. And we were all just
so we just looked at each other like,
well, it's
what
such
just
a juxtaposition
happened?
of of a phrase, and the whole restaurant just kind of turns around. This woman like storms off and gets in her car, and so I can only assume it was something about cutting somebody off.
Yeah, or cutting somebody off.
What was funny is that the guy never even turned.
He didn't even turn around. He just walked in, sat down, and was like ordering his food, ordering his drink.
And y'all have a blessed day. Don't be flicking people off. And
yeah, that was.
Oh god, that was funny. But so that's my funny story for the day. I don't get a lot of those, so I have to like cherish them when they happen.
And as for my funny story, there's a paranormal story that I'm going to tell.
About what?
Oh, you'll see. It's going to be at the
Not
end.
me.
Of course.
Oh my gosh.
Don't worry.
No, cut out right before that happens. You really don't want to hear that, I promise you.
It's going to be at the end of this podcast, so stay tuned for it. Hopefully I remember to do it. Yeah. I'll add it in if I had to. But yeah, look forward to it.
It's always me.
So what is this episode going to be about?
Good deal. So we're talking about the black-eyed children today. Now, this is something I have been into, and I don't care what you say, since the age of 13. This is a phenomenon that's been around for quite some time, and to be honest with you, back then I was too petrified of this phenomenon to even speak of it, much less talk about it, and much less tell others about it.
Okay.
It was kind of a situation where I would read the stories about this in broad daylight in my bedroom with the TV on with 3 people nearby. Like, I was so afraid of this. You have no idea.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. No, I've never had that issue before.
Well, you don't have emotions, so.
Yes, I'm emotionless.
So, the black-eyed children, this is I guess what you would call a paranormal phenomenon. And so, the origin... This phenomenon is described as children and teens who have jet black eyes without any, what's the scientific term? The whites of their eyes?
The scleria, I think, or the scleris. One of the two. It's the white around the pupils.
Sure. So these kids, teens, their eyes are jet black. Their iris, their pupil, the sclera, all of it's completely black.
Yes, their whole eye is black.
And they usually have pale skin or a death pallor is what my research says. I don't know.
Yeah, it just means that they look sickly.
Okay, so just pale to the point where it looks like, are you feeling well?
It's almost, if you were to imagine a vampire, the way their skin looks, not the newer vampires, not the ones that glisten in the sunlight. I'm talking about real vampires, the real vampires from back in the day.
Yeah, okay. So basically... These kids may be wearing normal clothes or sometimes nightgowns. That's creepy AF.
That is creepy for anybody wearing a nightgown out and about.
I would think they would escape from like a...
I'm going to go walk around in a nightgown just really to see if especially I scare anybody.
Though. Okay, so first, before we even get more into this, I think we should address the fact that kids can be creepy in general. And for some reason, adults have this...
She has no soul.
No, listen, like adults
kids
have
are
this
not creepy.
idea that kids acting weird is very scary to adults because I think we think of children like innocent and playful and like they're kids and no harm can possibly come from kids. And so I think that's the thing that scares people the most about this is because, well, you see the movies like where they have demonic kids or whatever. It scares people because it's like kids aren't supposed to be like that.
I'm going to get into that topic later.
Okay, but I just wanted to say that that's kind of where the fear purports from this.
I got you.
Okay, so I guess basically what I should say to start this off is that a man experienced what I'm about to describe to you, and I'll get into that specific encounter, but this is kind of where this whole phenomenon begins, when did this first experience. Well, I'll get into that.
Okay,
Let me
so you're
finish
going to tell
describing
us.
The kids.
Okay.
So these black-eyed kids usually appear at night. Go figure. But there have been some that have appeared during the day, and we'll talk about that. But usually what happens is they will knock on doors, windows, and the one thing that they want is to be let in. And it's almost as if they can't come in unless you say so, unless they're given permission. So they always knock on the door, and even if there's a doorbell, they will knock on the door. And that's what some people think is very odd about these kids, too.
Maybe they just think the doorbell's broken.
Maybe so. But they always knock on the door, and their voices can be monotonous, but sometimes they have very high-pitched voices as well.
Monotonous?
Monotonous. What did I say?
Monotone?
Monotone. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me.
Threw me off there for a second.
Well, I said on my bio, and probably a queen of pronunciations over here.
Yeah, that is
so
true.
So please forgive me.
I haven't read your
It's
notes,
kind of endearing
so
at this point,
I'm
though, I think.
trying to wing it
butchered
here.
so many names on Stephen Avery, and I'm so sorry for that,
sure
you guys.
everybody forgave for that.
Please forgive me. Expected in the future. It probably won't change. It's a personality trait at this point.
And I will try to correct her from now
Please
on.
do. I would appreciate it. Because I'm sure people listening are like, that is not how you pronounce that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
What...
I swear I'm educated. I swear. They always seem to be holding, wearing, or doing something that, like, typical kids would be doing when they appear at your door. So they might be holding a basketball.
What do typical kids do when they come to your door?
I'm gonna explain it. So they might be holding a basketball or riding a bike, or they're usually wearing typical kid clothing. But there are some cases where the kids appear to be confused as to how they should be acting.
When you say typical clothes, are you talking about like fashionable?
Yeah,
or...
I'm talking about normally it's like
they're in Nikes and
right.
Reebok.
Normally it's within the time period. A lot of them are wearing jeans or something.
Okay.
But some of these kids appear to be confused as to how they should be acting or what they should be asking. For example, there was a British man that encountered a BEK.
BEK, by the way, is black-eyed kid.
Right. And we're going to be using that a lot. Black-eyed kids is a mouthful, kind of.
I like saying black-eyed
anyway,
kid.
The British man encountered a BEK that asked him to use the television, but after he heard the man's accent, he changed it to telly. May I use the telly? So, and then another man reported that a BEK asked him, he saw him bringing in groceries, and the kid looked at him and said, "Is it food time?"
So, most black-eyed kids speak, like, American English, unless they go to United Kingdom and then they have to realize, oh, that's right, I need to change my accent.
Right, well, that's what it would seem. It seems so that they do their best to integrate and adapt to their surroundings, so it seems. They're also said to be able to communicate telepathically and have certain powers over their victims that almost magnetically draw them closer to opening the door. People will report that these kids, these weird-looking kids, are asking them to open the doors, and their mind's telling them no, but they find their door, opening more, to let the kids in, and they don't know.
Does it creak? Is it like...
I don't know, but, they're trying to close the door, but find themselves opening the door. So many people think they have some kind of magnetic powers that...
Telepathy, telling them,
they
you
can,
need to
and then
open the
also
door.
There's cases where people see the kids, usually they appear in groups, they see the kids look at each other for 10 seconds, and it seems like they're communicating telepathically, so, I don't know.
Interesting.
And then, most people, after encountering a BEK, most people report developing some type of illness, it could be as simple as nosebleeds, or sometimes there are more serious illnesses that develop. The advice when encountering a BEK given is usually to ignore them and walk away if you encounter them on the street. Reports of BEK spiked in 2013 after percolating for a number of years, but it has been of the hallmarks of an urban legend, according to paranormal investigator A. Milhorn. And this phenomenon really became prominent in the 1990s with one particular story that was made popular by a significant source. Although there have been some cases that have been reported, I know there's one from the 1950s that wasn't brought to light until after it kind of became a thing. Kind of like the Mandela effect.
Okay, I just wanted to jump in there for a second, because I had in my notes what urban legends are, and pretty much urban legends are present-day fictional stories presented as if they were true. They are urban not because they come from cities, but distinguish them from older stories that are similar traditions. Urban myths are simply a contemporary version of myths, fairy tales, folk tales, and tall tales.
Right, but just like all of those things, there is a fragment of the truth that comes with every urban legend. Perhaps it's not exactly that the way it is, but it comes from some element of truth.
All right. Well, I'll say the guy's name. David Emery was the one who wrote this. It was called Understanding the Definition of an Urban Legend. He is the one that quoted that. I'm quoting from him. And what he ended his story saying is the biggest difference today is that urban legends are often created specifically to confuse and trick rather than to amuse and inform like urban legends used to do.
I understand, and I know that there's some urban legends that are totally false, but what I am saying is that even if they're not exactly true, they are originated with some element of truth in them.
Oh, that's my bad. That's not Adam Ellis. That's part of my other notes. That's not who said that. You know who Adam Ellis is?
Adam Ellis, Dear David. Yes.
Yeah. I got him mixed up with my other notes. Oh, well, no big deal.
But yeah, so back to what I was saying. This first story that was reported in 1998 was by Brian Bethel, but this event actually occurred in 1996 in a city or town called help me with this. Abilene, Texas?
Yeah, Abilene, Texas.
Abilene, Texas. Okay. And Brian Bethel was a prominent journalist during this time. And that's why people kind of began to take this seriously, is because, like, he wasn't a known, like, crazy person. Do you know
what he journaled? You know, what was his journalism, his main focus?
I'm not sure. But I didn't look that further into it. But what I'm saying is that people began to take this, his words a little more seriously because of the fact that he was not a known person to, like, make things up. And he reported this, and he, like, wrote about it very eloquently, and people, like, listened, and then kind of like the Mandela effect started saying, I've experienced something like that too. What about this? What about this? And then even earlier reports, like, this happened to me 20 years ago. And this was my experience. But I figured I could start it off by telling Brian Bethel's story and how this phenomenon kind of came about in the 90s.
I just wanted to make sure that the reason I asked that is because one of my points is that some people get on the internet and they seek attention. Mm-hmm. And if he's a great journalist, if he's a great writer, he could just be like wanting to write a spoof and see if he can get a legend going. And that's just my theory. That's just a theory that I came up with. It may not be true. It may be, but that's why I was just asking.
But I know the things that he journaled about were not,
right.
The things that he wrote about were not necessarily paranormal things. So people were kind of like, this is really weird for you to be writing about this.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is that he may have decided to go a different way. And since he doesn't write that type of stories, that, hey, I could probably get away with going online, typing up a great story, and then seeing if people follow it.
But let's listen to a story.
Yes, let's hear it.
Cue the dramatic, scary music as I tell the story. Okay. He says that he was parked in his car in front of a movie theater in the evening, making out a check to drop off for his internet provider, when two boys, one age 9, maybe 12, wearing hoodies, knocked on the driver's side of his car window. I was immediately gripped by an incomprehensible, soul-racking fear. I had no idea why. He cracked the car window and learned that they wanted a ride to home to give money to see Mortal Kombat, a movie that was playing at the theater.
If anybody doesn't know what Mortal Kombat is, that's the arcade game that they turned into a movie.
I wasn't familiar with it. Plausible enough, but all throughout this exchange, the irrational fear continued and grew in Brian. I had no reason to be frightened of these two boys, but for some reason I was. He saw that the movie had already started, so driving anywhere and back would mean the kids would miss most of the movie. His report continued. All the while, the spokesman uttered assurances. It wouldn't take long. They were just two little kids. They didn't have a gun or anything. The last part was a bit unnerving. In the short time that Brian had broken the gaze of these two spokesmen children, something had changed, and his mind exploded in a vortex of all-consuming terror. Both boys stared at him with coal black eyes, soulless orbs like two great swaths of starless night. Brian full-on freaked out inside while trying to appear completely sane and calm. I made whatever excuses came to mind, all of them designed to get me the H out of there. I wrapped my hand around the gear shift, threw the car into reverse, and began to roll up the window, apologizing all the while. My fear must have been evident. The boy in the back wore a look of confusion. The spokesman banged sharply on the window as I rolled it up. His words, now full of anger, echo in my mind even today.
We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in.
I drove out of the parking lot blind in fear, and I'm surprised I didn't sweep a car or two along the way. Sidesweep.
Sideswipe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I stole a quick look in my rearview mirror before peeling out into the night. The boys were gone. Even if they had run, I don't believe there was any place they could have hidden from that view quickly. And that was an interview from Brian Bethel, and he was repeating his story in an interview from 2013.
That is an interesting story. I'll give him that. It
definitely creeps me out. And, like, the elements of this, they just don't seem like... It's so random of a thing. Like, all the details, like Mortal Kombat and the fact that he was apologizing while rolling the window up. I mean, it just seems like... Because when you're doing urban legends or when you're telling them, it's, like, always... I don't know. You know how urban legends go. It's just like, there's no details about it. It's just like, this happened, this happened, this happened.
Well, most urban legends I've heard...
There's no personality.
To me, I always think of, like, you go to camp and you hear stories. There's a hook man that's, walking around these days.
I always think of that when I think of...
Yeah, automatically.
But let me continue.
Yes.
So after that report, after Bethel's report, forums, ghost hunters, and psychologists received many similar reports. However... Nobody offered any physical evidence, so there's a point to you there. But nor were there any reports of hoaxers, exposed trying to scare people by portraying BEKs. So there was no reports of any like kids running around with black contacts or anything that were like actively trying to replicate this story.
Mm-hmm.
But as the story spread, they often shared common elements. It's always at night, most of the time, except for that one case I'm going to tell you about. And often there's a storm. Now, that's the first I've heard about being a storm, but, dark and stormy night. The person encountering the BEKs was usually going about his or her normal activities when the BEKs would appear. They would always feel extreme fear and run away or drive away. Essentially, we don't have any hardened video or photographic proof, except for the hundreds and hundreds of encounters that have been reported. Now, there is one report of a BEK encounter where a man... put a camera outside his house for 5 days and played some type of frequency to kind of lure in one of these BEKs.
Yeah, I read that article actually.
Well, it's a YouTube video too.
Oh, the YouTube video is what he showed, but I actually read the article about how he got with other paranormal people
to develop the frequency to play.
No, not to develop it. He said that they were recording it. There were sounds or something whenever black-eyed children were around.
Oh, okay.
And so they took that sound and started playing it.
Replicated it?
Yes, replicating it.
Gotcha. So they played that, and 6 days later, his camera picked up a footage of a young girl standing on his porch for 4 hours in the middle of the night with seemingly dark eyes. Now, you can go
on... An hour.
Oh, my research is 4.
The article I read said the girl stood out there for 1 hour, and I watched the video.
Watch the news report on it, and they said 4.
The video showed 1 hour passed by while the girl was standing.
I could be incorrect, but my research I gathered from a news.
You guys
source.
can check us and please comment whether it was an hour or 4 hours.
Nevertheless, you can find the video on YouTube and go.
Oh
watch
yes.
It. Yeah, and whether it's fabricated or not, it's there.
It's pretty new.
Yeah, it is very recent. I think it's like from 2016 or something. It's pretty recent.
Yeah, that sounds
even earlier than that.
I thought it was 2017, but
might have been.
I might be wrong. Like I said, I just read the article and it had a video of it, and I decided, let's watch it. What harm did it do? And it was, I don't know. You know how people can edit things.
Sure. And I'm not saying that wasn't fabricated. I'm just saying that as far as evidence goes, this man claims that this is evidence.
Yeah. And to me, when I watched the video, she didn't even have black eyes. All you could see was just a girl. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So.
Okay, so what I thought I would do, if this is okay with you, is I've kind of gathered some significant encounters, kind of to give that scare factor, but also to kind of get our listeners an idea of what a typical occurrence seems like.
No, it's not okay with me.
Well, then, I guess that's the end of the podcast.
All right, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah. And then let's cue that scary music again. Alright, and for those of you wondering, these are encounters of the BEKs that were gathered on a forum on Reddit. Okay, so this one's called The Midnight Caller. It almost felt like a dream. I woke up to my dog Lucy barking. She was upright on the bed where my husband and I were sleeping with our 22-month-old daughter. Staring at our door like an unknown stranger was out there rummaging around. I thought she was just freaking out over a house noise. We'd only had her for 3 months and she was still a puppy. It could have been anything. Our roommate, a creak from the house settling, the awnings moving outside in the breeze. I wasn't too concerned initially. I decided the best bet would be to open the door and show her nothing was there. It sounds a bit silly, but it's what we do with our daughter when she gets scared, and I figured it should work with a puppy too. I opened the door and she raced to the front door. She stood there snarling at the door. It was an angry, violent growl, one I had never heard her make before. I looked groggily at her and opened the baby gate blocking the doorway, planning to open the door and show her everything was okay. The second my hand reached for the deadbolt, Lucy went wild. She started barking and jumped toward me, and when I touched the metal, she suddenly changed her temper. She whimpered, almost like she was afraid, and started backing down. As her mannerism changed, so did mine. I wasn't calm anymore. My heart was racing and sinking at the same time. I had been flooded with a mixture of fear and dread. I looked through the peephole. I can't explain why I looked, but I did. Outside were 2 kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than me, and didn't look much younger. I'm 21, and she looked to be about 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was a light shade of honey blonde, and she wore it long about mid-back, with long, thin, blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans, a light wash that's popular right now, and a thin-looking olive-colored pullover-style hoodie. She held the hand of a small girl, who looked to be around 3 or 4, in the same style jeans and a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly, but had the same shade of hair, tied back in a ponytail. She held a stuffed toy under her free arm, and it was identical to one my daughter has, as was the style of her dress. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have asked these children in and given them some tea or hot chocolate to get them out of the bitter cold. Something about them seemed off. At this point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled. Nothing. I hadn't turned on any lights. These kids had no indicators that I was even at the door. But the older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong, and accentless. She held her head tilted downward and I couldn't see her eyes. She said,
"We have to use your phone."
I stood, frozen in fear. How did she know I was there? She raised her head to face me directly, and that was when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through her bangs before. They were black, or midnight blue, or a dark, dark purple. They were otherworldly. She said,
"Our mother is worried."
As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second she looked at me through the door. I have never been one to believe in these things. As an atheist and skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, I had written off many a ghost story from friends and family members, eager to tell their tale. I didn't believe it. Still, I couldn't rationalize my way out of this. I did not answer her. Slowly and silently, I backed away from the door. Lucy still cowering at my ankles, she kept talking.
"Just let us in to use your phone."
I took another step back, and with that step, the tone changed. At first, she seemed polite. When I took that second step back, though, she became commanding, almost hostile.
"We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone?"
Lucy snarled at the door, and I inclined backward, though something inside me seemed to be slowly pulling me back to the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to go back and let them in. I go to my room, covered the window, locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of the nightlight. I heard her call me back to the door once more, and then quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night, and I haven't slept right since. I know from reading about them that BEKs can't just come in without permission. I know they haven't hurt anyone, but I still fear I'll be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was just a dream. He kept telling me to forget it. But this lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when the house is silent at night, this fear of a knock at the door, tells me otherwise.
See, it's very intriguing. Like, I was fully captivated by the story because I love horror movies and reading books. Like, Stephen King is my hero. I have read almost every book. That's all my Kindle is filled with, because that's what intrigues me. Just like that story intrigued me. And that's why one of my points is that there are storytellers out there, and they're going to do a great job telling stories on the internet and get people involved. So, on that note, I'm going to tell my own story. Are you ready for it? Cue the music. Along the road, there came a stranger in a land where the strangers were rare and suspect. He walked up to the door of a crumbling farmhouse and hammered. After a long moment, a light blinked on somewhere in the house, and a young woman appeared, drawing a cheap mail-order bathrobe tightly about her. She opened the door a crack, and her sleep-swollen face winced with fear as she stared at the apparition on her doorstep. He was over 6 feet tall and dressed entirely in black. He wore a black suit, black tie, black hat, and a black overcoat, with impractical black dress shoes covered with mud. His face, barely visible in the darkness, sported a neatly trimmed mustache and goatee. The flashes of lightning behind him added an eerie effect.
May I use your phone?
He asked in a deep baritone, his voice lacking the familiar West Virginia accent. The girl gulped silently and backed away. "My husband," she mumbled. "Talk to my husband." She closed the door quickly and backed away into the darkness. Minutes passed. Then she returned, accompanied by a rugged young man, hastily buckling his trousers in place. He too turned pale at the sight of the stranger. "We ain't got a phone here," he grunted through the crack in the door just before he slammed it. The couple retreated, murmuring to themselves, and the tall stranger faded into the night. Now, beards were a very rare sight in West Virginia in 1967. Men in formal suits and ties were even more rare in those back hills of Ohio Valley, and bearded, black-garbed strangers on foot in the rain had never been seen there before. In the days that followed, the young couple told their friends about the apparition. Obviously, they concluded he had been a fearful omen of some sort. Perhaps he had been the devil himself. 3 weeks later, these two people were dead among the victims of the worst tragedy ever to strike that section of West Virginia. They were driving across the Silver Bridge, which spanned the Ohio River, when it suddenly collapsed. Now, I don't know if you remember this, the Mothman prophecies. A lot of people connect that. If you watch that movie, that's the bridge they're talking about. Now, their friends remembered the story of the bearded stranger in the night. It had indeed been a sinister omen, one that confirmed their religious beliefs and superstitions. So a new legend was born. Beelzebub had visited West Virginia on the eve of a terrible tragedy. Now, I would prefer to believe that I did not look like the devil in my late beard. This is the story from John Keene's perspective. I would prefer to believe that I did not look like the devil in my late beard. I certainly had no intention of launching new legends when my car ran off the road in West Virginia that number, and I plodded from house to house searching for a telephone so I could call a tow truck. I had just come up from Atlanta, Georgia, where I had delivered a speech to a local club. West Virginia was almost a second home to me in those days. I had visited the state 5 times, investigating a long series of strange events, and had many friends there. One of them, Miss Mary Heyer, the star reporter of the Athens, Ohio Messenger, was with me that night. We had been talking to UFO witnesses. So this is a guy that was looking for UFOs, and he started his own legend just by doing this. So one of them, where it said that, we had been out talking to UFO witnesses, and earlier that evening we ourselves watched a very strange light in the sky. Since there was a heavy low cloud layer, it could not have been a star. He talks about what it was. Miss Howard waited in the car while I trudged through the mud and muck. We had been trying to climb a slippery hill to a spot where we had seen many unusual things in the past. I found that the telephone in the houses closest to our location were not working apparently, knocked out by the storm. So I had to keep walking until I finally found a house with a working phone. The owner refused to open his door, so we shouted back and forth. I gave him a phone number to call, and he obliged and went back to bed. I never knew what he looked like. But his point, of course, is that Beelzebub was not wandering along the back roads of West Virginia that night. It was just a very tired John Keel, busy catching a well of a cold.
Well, first of all, that's freaking creepy. Why are you going into people's house in the middle of the night? If someone comes up to my apartment in the middle of the night and knocks on the door...
You got to remember, no cell phones.
Exactly. I'm going to freak out. I don't care. That's still really scary, and it's natural for someone to be scared about that.
Right. But the point of the story is not that you're not supposed to go up to people's houses.
I understand, but I'm just thinking, like...
Legends
that
can
start...
That
guy thinks that's normal. That's not normal. It's really scary.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, legends can start in the most unusual ways.
I understand.
Just by people thinking, it being dark, it's a stormy night... His car is broken down, and he's dressed all in a black suit.
Better go knock on strangers' houses. They won't be afraid.
Well, what would you do?
Be afraid.
No. I'm talking about you're John Keel. Your car's broke down the side of the road. None of the houses that you've gone to so far
Honestly,
have
I would
phones
probably
that
be too
work.
afraid to get out of my car and walk anywhere, because for all I know, I could be walking. I'm just too cautious, okay? If I would be afraid that I would walk up to a house full of psychos.
I just want to make it clear that she grew up with cell phones around her, and the older generations didn't have cell phones whenever they were younger. So
okay, well maybe I would have been more.
This was back in
braver.
what did I say, 70s or 80s when the bridge collapsed. So
times I guess probably were safer back then, but they're not now.
No, it's not about safety.
Yes, it is.
It's about being broken down and asking somebody for help.
I'm telling you that. I would have, slept in my car till morning. But that's me.
She probably... I will confirm that. She would have stayed in the car. The doors would have been locked. Yep. If there was a blanket in the car, she probably would have laid down under the seat.
If you can't see them, they can't see you.
I think you would have probably locked yourself in the trunk.
Logic.
It's logic.
Well, good point. I mean, I can see that. But at the same time... There's not just one or two of these. There are hundreds of these. And as much as I know you'd like to believe that there's all these people out here contributing and feeding this urban legend, I just don't know if I buy that yet.
Well, do you think Beelzebub was another name for the Mothman prophecy? It actually came a movie. And just like Black-Eyed Children...
that name is actually associated with
the devil. Yes, I know.
Presence.
Right.
So.
But what I'm saying is, so is Mothman. Mothman created evil things to happen. And a movie...
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of
a
giant light and a giant moth going to it.
Well, if you look at the statue, I think there is a statue somewhere in West Virginia. I think it's Pleasant.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Pleasant, West Virginia, or something like that. Yeah. But I just now found out online that somebody created a movie called Black-Eyed Kids or Black-Eyed Children.
Really?
Yes, they created a movie called that.
It must not be popular.
It isn't. It's got two stars out of 10 or something like that.
Maybe that's why I haven't seen it. But I would like to give you some different versions of some encounters so you can see that they're not all typical and there's been different versions of them, which to me kind of not goes more to prove that it's real, but maybe goes on to prove that because they're not all exactly the same, to me it kind of goes to say that this phenomenon could possibly... It doesn't seem like these are being made up. That's what I'm getting at. Because if they were feeding into this legend, they would make sure it sounds like just all the others, right?
No, not exactly. You want to be original. So you want to have the same type of person or child,
is two
but
paragraphs.
You want something different. Your
this
unique
next story is
add-on.
2 paragraphs. It's very short and it's very odd.
Okay.
So I'll preface with that. It's called Bus Encounter. I was riding the bus back home after work. It was about 1 a.m. I'm a security guard and often work odd hours. So I'm sitting there, and this guy gets on, sits across from me. He was wearing a suit, had a briefcase, regular-looking guy in his 20s. What struck me about him at first as odd that he was chewing a cigar. Not smoking it. You can't smoke on the bus. He was chewing it. So I was just looking at him while he stared out the window and chewed his cigar, and all of a sudden he turned and looked at me. His eyes were pitch black. My heart started beating like a madman. That's not what he said.
I imagine what he said.
And I felt my gorge rising. I was starting to panic, and I had no idea why. I was, again, very terrified of this guy.
Wait, this man, it's a man, not a child.
It's a man.
So this is a black-eyed man?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So you
These
just
are kind of varying.
you just ruined this episode. This is about children. No, go ahead.
The guy then grinned at me, and his teeth were all covered in tobacco bits and brown juice, the cigar clamped between them. I almost screamed, but instead I had the presence of mind to just get up and take the seat right behind the driver. I calmed down a bit after that, but I kept an eye on the guy. He ended up chatting with some girl that got on, and they were still talking when I got off. I later convinced myself that he was just trolling me, having fun with a pair of contacts, but now I wonder.
Kind
of weird, right? I mean, like you said, it's not kids.
So his eyes, he said
black.
his eyes were pitch black.
Right. So I guess it kind of goes in with that theme. Of course,
I've
read other stories where they say it's adults too.
Did it say when that story was? Was that closer to the 2013?
This
or
doesn't tell me.
because you said it picked up at 2013.
Right, but this
doesn't say when.
Site does not tell me. No.
Okay.
So
I figure I'm going to get the rest of my information in after you tell your stories because
there's just a couple more I want to tell, just because they're not typical and they're short and they're unusual. So I'm going to tell just a couple more short ones, just to kind of give you more of an idea of how they can be different. This story is actually from a woman who decided to let them in. And as you know, doom is supposedly set to follow you if you let them in.
Mm-hmm.
So in January of 2016, a Vermont woman reported that she actually let a black-eyed child in her home. A blizzard was ravaging the world outside her door, so she was very surprised to hear a loud knock on it. Figuring someone probably crashed their car trying to navigate the weather, she made her way to the door and peeked out the window. There was no car. She described a feeling of dread wash over her for reasons she couldn't understand. The banging continued, so she decided to wake her husband to let him answer it instead. Very smart woman. 2 small children were on the other side of the door, and they were not dressed appropriately for the storm. The woman and her husband let the little boy and girl inside, despite the great sense of unease their presence made them feel, and regretted it almost instantly. Their cats hissed, and seemed just as bothered by these kids as they were. It didn't seem to matter what she asked them. What happened? Are you lost? Do you want some hot chocolate? The answer was always the same.
Our parents will be here soon.
She made them hot chocolate anyway, and when she returned with the mugs, that's when she noticed their eyes. They were completely jet black, with no whites at all, just giant black pupils. They asked for the bathroom, and she directed them to it. Then everything happened all at once. Her husband's nose started bleeding, the power went out, and as she rushed to get a tissue, she was confronted by both children staring at her from the hallway.
Our parents are here.
Just like that, they walked out. She watched as the creepy children got into a black car with 2 very tall men in suits. They left. Within months of the encounter, her husband was diagnosed with skin cancer. She began suffering from chronic nosebleeds as her husband initially had, and her health slowly began deteriorating. She is certain it's because of these black-eyed children. So that kind of goes back.
Did they die?
It does not say if her husband died, but
well, she wouldn't have been able to write this story.
Well, I'm
probably.
talking about her. I thought you meant her husband.
Oh, I meant either one. I guess if they were having nosebleeds, the children gave them an aneurysm or something.
Yeah, but that kind of goes about the illnesses that tend to follow them if, you let one in or whatever. All right, here's the last one I want to tell. And I want to tell this one because this is the one that happened in broad daylight. And I think this one's just kind of unusual. And it also happened in a car. So it's kind of the idea of you have to let them in, be it your house or be it a car, just your...
What if you just meet one on the street? You're just walking by and
there's
they're
stories about that too. And they say you're supposed to, avoid them. And I don't know what.
Don't let him in your personal space.
There was a case from the 1950s where a little boy encountered one, and he said, "You need to take me to your house." And the boy started doing it, and then he got creeped out and took off and ran. So okay. I don't know. All right, but here's the next one.
So they're vampires.
This one's called "You Must Let Me In." This happened on March 17th in 2008, and this is from the perspective of this boy, and he was 12. I had my one and only encounter with a black-eyed kid. Before my experience, I had never heard of anything having to do with black-eyed kids. I was 12. I was sitting outside of a hairdresser's in an old Chevy pickup, waiting for my mom to get her hair cut. About 15 minutes had passed, and I saw some kid walking back and forth along the sidewalk in front of my parked car. At first, I thought I recognized him as one of my friends from school, so I banged on the front windshield until he looked my way. It was not anyone I knew. At this point, I was not scared at all. Not yet. The boy walked over to the side of my car and just stared. I think to let me get a good look at his eyes, to freak me out. Let me tell you, if you have never seen a black-eyed kid, you have no idea what to imagine. Pupils black as the night sky. The boy whispers,
"You must let me in."
And then I locked the car doors and ducked down into the space below the seats. 5 minutes later, he was gone. When my mother got back to the car, she told me that a boy with black eyes had come into the hairdresser's and had insisted for my mother to give him the car keys. She refused. Thank God she did. That is weird. That one gave me chills. Oh my gosh. I think just because he, didn't even care. He went into the dresser's, give me the car keys.
Like I said,
that is so creepy.
If you listen to the wording of the story, if this was an average person, if I tried to write a story and it was going to be a scary story, I couldn't write anything like that. Even if a real story happened, it would just be awful to read. Y'all would be like, that doesn't sound scary. And I'd be like, it really happened. No, y'all wouldn't believe me. But when somebody knows how to write and describe things.
That kid didn't write that well. That was just, it was very poorly structured. And
if you think that story was written well, give us a comment and let us know whether it was or not.
There was a lot of misspellings on it, so...
Well, spelling has nothing to do with creativity.
I'm just saying the authors of these, it's not like they're all famous bloggers.
No, they might not be. Maybe they just do it
people.
For fun.
Maybe.
Trolls. Trolls that know how to write great stories.
So listen, I just gave you about 3 or 4 stories of some encounters just to give you an idea, give you a sampling. But these are not anywhere close to all of the stories. There are hundreds and hundreds. Go to Google. Search stories. I assume there's probably threads on Reddit. But yeah, there's tons and tons of these stories. Just kind of similar to the Mandela effect. It's there's hundreds and hundreds of examples.
I'm sure there are, but okay. I'm going to give a couple of my points just to go over.
For it. I have my theories that the internet says as to what these are, but you go ahead.
Well, okay. The first one that I came up with is hallucinations and priming.
As to why these things are happening.
Right. This is to the reasons why these things are happening. I've already given you the one where I think that they're storytellers, people needing attention, but one thing that I came across,
it's called... My mom will love me if I tell a story about a black-eyed kid. I'm sorry. Okay.
So priming is where a pre-suggestion has already been placed in the mind and only an activator stimulus that is appropriately vague in the right circumstance sets off the connection between knowledge in your brain and your senses, making a false connection, leading to a false conclusion. Now, what that really is saying is that, say I gave you a list, and in that list was the word chair. And then I later said, tell me a word that starts with CHA. 9 out of 10 times, you're going to say chair. But if I didn't give you that list before, then you could have said chain or chapel or chat, any one of those words that start with CHA. But most likely, you will say chair because you have been primed to say that. Which brings me to the point that in the 1990s, it became very popular in movies and television shows to show black eyes, complete. The sclera, everything covered in black, And I found a couple of movies. There were quite a few of them, but the main ones that I saw was Hellraiser, because Pinhead, I think actually a few of them had black eyes. The other one was Krull, and I don't even remember watching that movie. So, but it even goes back as far as a movie that came out in the 1940s called The Mummy's Hand, where they actually put plastic in the actors' eyes, and they had to keep putting drops in their eyes so that way it wouldn't burn so much. But so you're seeing these things, and so you're primed to think, okay, well, these black eyes means evil because I've seen these movies, and these movies are telling me that the people with black eyes. So if you have hallucinations, then you could hallucinate about these things. And I mean, more of the people hallucinate than you think. Like, I think I read an article where 1 out of 20 people have hallucinated in their life. And it's not like it's major hallucinations. It could be minor hallucinations. You know, you're just lack of sleep. You haven't been sleeping a while. You know, you have insomnia. Dehydration cause it. While you're on drugs, if you're withdrawing from drugs, even certain medications. There's even sleeping medications now. I forgot which one somebody was talking about, but it actually makes you walk in your sleep and have hallucinations about what's happening. People have night terrors. I've had night terrors where I've seen things happen. I know they're not real. I know it's just all in my head. But, you know, if you see these things, then maybe that is a possibility. I mean,
I guess where I am with that as far as hallucinations is like, again, it's just very difficult for me to believe, just like it was with the Mandela effect, that hundreds of people are having this exact same hallucination. I know what you're saying, the fact that, people hear about it and that's why they... I
was going to say, how many people have watched all these movies? But The Cell also has that in the movie.
7 out of 16 of the stories that I read about are from people who never had heard of this. And so,
I asked people at work, and nobody's ever heard of black-eyed children.
Right. It's kind of one of the... For me, I thought it was pretty well known because I was terrified of it.
It's not.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I didn't even know until you told me.
So, maybe people will be interested. But what I'm saying is that I think that theory only works as far as you can't hallucinate about something that you have never seen before or that you haven't imagined before.
Yeah, but remember, priming, you are fitting the pieces together.
Sure,
so if you've seen children and you've seen movies with people with black eyes, even children with black eyes, then you are going to, if you have an hallucination, you could be sitting in your car, or the security guard could have had like a sleep or something. It didn't sleep all day.
I think that theory only works is if you've heard of this phenomenon and you're like turning every corner thinking you're going to see one. And then you see one. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
But most of these stories are probably found, we'll say Reddit, and they're reading other stories going, oh my gosh, I had the same experience, and let me tell my experience, and then they tell theirs. But they could have false memories on that as well.
I mean, and some of these are like, start off with, I had no idea anyone else had ever experienced anything like this. I had never heard of this. Is this what this was?
And I would tell somebody that too if I wanted to tell my story and be original. We'll agree to disagree on this because we're never going to agree on these. I just like to give both sides.
If this was a thing where like 5 people, I would totally be with you. If it was a thing where it's like 5 people are saying this,
it's never just going to be 5 people. It's never all urban legends. Tons of people see UFOs.
So in order to say this, you have to say that hundreds and hundreds of people are either crazy, or they're liars. One of those two.
Well, there are a lot of people out there with mental health problems and people who do drugs. Yes, I will say that there are lots of people out there. Okay. You can agree to disagree.
All right, we'll have to. Yeah. I think I think to believe in this, I think to believe in this, you kind of have to already be open to some of this.
Yes,
subject
I
matter,
agree with
so.
that 100%.
All right, let me get into the theories that
Let
are
me just go to my
popular.
last point, and then I want you to go over your theories. My other point is that, I said that there are journalists out there or bloggers who, write stories and want to have a great story. Well, the reason I mentioned Adam Ellis earlier was because of Dear David. And so I did a little bit of research on him just to find out, what he's like, what he does in...
Oh, I wish you wouldn't get into that because I really want to
It's
save that
just
for
going to
another
be real quick,
podcast.
and I'm also going to save it for the other podcast.
Oh, man, because I really wanted to do a podcast on Dear David.
The other episode that we have, that's why whenever I thought about this, I was like, I better just give...
Yeah, save it for that one.
I just want to... let me think. Okay. All right, we'll leave it at... Oh, gosh. See, I'm torn. I want to give, at least something. I just want to say that he did...
You're giving away your best ammo for that podcast, man.
I can reuse it. I can reuse it. It's okay. Because he used to write for BuzzFeed. I think he total 403 posts on BuzzFeed. And most of his stuff was humor, but... because of its humor, it could lead him down a path of trolling. And, even Loie Lane, who you love more than anything. Yeah, I know. You love Loie Lane. She notes how Ellis could have drawn inspiration from the story. What was the Davis story where they found the boy in the box? The boy in the box on BuzzFeed. If y'all want to check that out, it's a great story.
If you don't know who Adam Ellis is, or if you don't know who Loie Lane is, a YouTube personality. Adam Ellis is a ex-writer for BuzzFeed. I don't know if you know that, but
yes, I do.
He's a comic artist,
Yes.
and he had this supposedly haunted apartment going on that he shared on Twitter called Dear David. If you haven't heard of it, don't go look it up. We're going to do a podcast on it. Just hang on until we do a podcast.
Oh, we're going to do one on Dear David?
Oh, yeah, I really want to.
All right. So she said that... he covered by his coworkers at BuzzFeed to weave together his Dear David tale. Therefore, Ellis's Dear David story could be a hoax inspired by true events. And so that's just another person. I mean, I'm not saying that Dear David, that he's not having these experiences. He could be. Or he could be fooling everybody.
Absolutely. But again, I think that's conversation for another podcast. Because I have some rebuttals for that.
That's perfectly fine.
All right. Let me get into the theories. The people who are open to this phenomenon... they're really not 100% sure what is. David Weatherly, who's been investigating this since the 90s, actually published a book called The Black-Eyed Children, I believe. And he proposes about 4 different theories as to what people believe that it is. So I'll present these to you. The first one is aliens. A lot of people, there's a phenomenon called the Men in Black who believe people are associated to be with aliens.
It's a movie too.
Well, not Will Smith. Men in Black are supposedly these tall men who wear sunglasses and they're in suits and they're abnormally tall, and supposedly they come around you if you are investigating or talking about UFOs or aliens, and that's kind of similar to this phenomenon, and people kind of think they're the children of the black guy or of the
Men in Black.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So,
that's an interesting theory. I like that theory.
I don't know.
I was thinking more like vampires because you have to invite them in your home.
Well, yeah, I mean, they think they're otherworldly. No matter what they are, everyone agrees they're otherworldly. So whether they're aliens, that kind of would go with the fact that they don't really know how they should be acting, and the fact that they can communicate telepathically. I don't know, that's what some people think.
Yeah, the reason vampires, like I said, movies, I think there was a vampire movie. If you know which one it is, please comment. But there's a vampire movie where there are kids and they have black eyes and they're trying to get into the house.
The next one I would say is the most popular, and if I had to pinpoint I always give you my opinion. This is what I think they are. And this is what the majority of the population thinks that they are. Okay. They think they're some kind of demonic entity. So as they come with a great sense of fear and oftentimes show paranormal abilities, many people think that they're something demonic. This is a theory that most people believe. Over half the world, about 57% out of the people who believe in this phenomenon think that this is what it is. And also, I'm sorry, that percentage was for the people who exist in the world who believe in demons or the existence of demonic possession.
Okay, I was going to say, you threw me off
right,
there for
I'm
a
sorry,
second.
I misread there. But because if you would believe this theory, not only do you have to believe in, like, this phenomenon in general, but you also have to be open to
believing in
I
demons.
think there's demonic, right,
yeah,
things in the world. But you would be surprised. 57% of the world believes in things like that, including myself. Some people also suggest that there are mentions of these types of creatures roaming the earth in the Bible, so they have biblical references as to what these creatures could be. And I'm going to do my very best to pronounce this.
Nephilim.
I believe this is a Greek or Latin word for fallen angels, depending upon scholarly interpretation. But that's the word that's referenced in the Bible, and some would argue are kind of a product of some type of alien species that's intervening and procreating with humans. And the Bible reference says, quote, tell me that name of the word again.
Nephilim.
So I don't butcher it. Nephilim. The Nephilim proved to be in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of the true God continued to have relations with the daughters of men, and they bore sons to them. They were the mighty ones. And that's Genesis 6.
The Nephilim proved to be in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of the true God continued to have relations with the daughters of men, and they bore sons to them. They were mighty ones.
So many people think this is referencing this type of
You think maybe that's referring to the giants, like David and Goliath was a giant?
I don't know, because people scoff at the idea of giants. People who
there are
read
people
the Bible, but
who have pituitary problems, and they grow to be 7, 8
I just was
feet
watching
tall.
a baseball game the other day, and one of the pitchers was 6'11", an inch shy of 7 feet tall.
Basketball players are huge.
So it's like, what do you consider to be giant? Like,
I don't know. What's the average
saying,
size? What's the average size in wherever the stuff in the Bible took place?
It's just the point of giants be real. Why could this not be real?
Well, just think of it this way: if you were a pygmy and the LA Lakers came and visited you, you would be like, "Oh my gosh, there's giants."
And I think another reason people think it's demonic is because, similar to like you were saying with vampires, you have to actually invite them in. Yeah. Exactly. So,
okay.
All right. The third theory is that there's some kind of hybrid or shapeshifter, similar to Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. So a little more with the fantastical elements there. And the fourth and final weaker theory is that they're wandering ghosts trapped in.
Oh, why is that so weak?
Trapped in the in-between world. They're lost souls of murdered children who walk around wanting to feed, haunt, and invoke fear.
So there's such thing as demons, but no such thing as ghosts.
I'm reading word for word what this source said. That's not my opinion.
I'm just messing with you anyway.
So that's essentially
I want to know what people think.
I want to know what people think. I mean, I will say this. I'm less sure of this than I was when I was 13. 13, hook, line, and sinker. I was a believer. I was terrified every time I was home alone or something like that. I mean,
You were a scared child.
No matter if it's realistic or not, it is still a terrifying thing. And I think it kind of...
So you're saying I should never go get contacts and come into your room with them on...
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, that would not
Ruin
be good.
That.
But yeah, I really want to know what other people's
I'm going to
opinions.
put up on Twitter a poll and see if people believe in it.
Or if they've even heard of it.
We'll do 2 polls.
Maybe I was
Or that could be one of the answers, yes, no, or never heard of it.
I mistakenly believed that a lot of people knew about this, but then again, I haven't really
kind of
want
want
to
see
it.
how many people do believe in it. Because if they say yes or no, then that means they had.
And if you haven't heard of it, if you enjoyed this podcast for the thrill factor, even if you don't think it's real, go ahead and subscribe, give us a like, give us a comment, let us know if you liked it.
If you enjoyed the spooky stories.
It helps us to really gauge what people think and what you're liking.
Yes. It does.
It's really helpful for us.
Because we cover, what do we cover? True crime,
pop culture,
paranormal,
conspiracy, sci-fi conspiracy. true crime and paranormal.
Yes.
Right.
So we like to put out what people really want to hear.
This was something I've been wanting to talk about a long time, but... And now at this point, I think
She was scared too.
I'm brave enough to talk about it.
She wasn't brave enough to talk about it. She was afraid they were going to come to the door and be like, "We heard you were talking about us."
Even when there's a
That's
doorbell.
them there. Yeah, no doorbells.
It still freaks me out.
I'm
Sorry,
going to start
I'll never
knocking on the
be
door
freaked
every time I come home from work. I'm just like, and you'll be like under the bed. You're like looking at me like, "No, don't you dare." All right. So anyway, it's time for the story. I got to tell my story.
What story?
The paranormal story. Oh, you'll see. Oh, you'll love it. All right. So I'm at work. I'm going to paint this picture. I'm at work and I'm getting ready to get off. It's probably like an hour before I'm getting ready to get off work. So it's about
like
10:30 at night. Well, it's 10:30 at night and I don't get off till 11:30.
Yeah.
So I'm like, she knows not to call me at work. I can't answer my phone. So I just think it was nothing because there was no message. And, when I got off work, there was no message. So I go walk out to my car. And I get in the car. I start it up, and I get ready to leave the parking lot. And she calls me again. And so I answer the phone, and she's in a panic. And she's like, "You need to get here. Are you leaving? How far away are you?"
As I remember, I was very unnaturally calm.
It was weird. It wasn't like you were in a panic, but everything. It was like pressured speech. That's what it was. And so, I get there as fast as I can. I'm doing, yes, I'm doing like twice the speed limit, double the speed limit. I mean, and I get home.
You can tell
I'm
something was
thinking
wrong.
something bad has happened.
What did you think?
I don't know. I just knew something bad had happened. So I get there and I walk in the door. And she's like, "Come here." And I'm like, "What?" And she says, "Look." And I said, "Yeah, it looks like you made some chocolate chip pizza." She loves the chocolate chip pizza from this pizza buffet that's around her house. And so I look at it and I'm like, "Yeah, the chocolate chips in the cake is missing." And I'm like, "All right, so what's wrong? You just didn't add it yet?" It looked like she just, baked the dough and hadn't added anything yet. And she goes, "No, I did bake it. It's gone."
Yeah,
and I'm
like it was it was the pizza crust and nothing on top of it.
Yeah, it was just pizza crust sitting there. I thought she didn't even make the.
Yeah, that's how weird it looked. And I remember because the reason I had seen it is because I went in there to get another piece. And it was gone.
Right. So, I look at her, and I look at it, and I'm like, I could have got a ticket for speeding home over this. And she's like, "No, something bad happened. Something's wrong. There was something evil in the house, or somebody came in."
Because it was gone within a matter of like 10 minutes.
Right. And so I look down, and what do you think's in the floor below us? The dog. So I'm like, the obvious thing is the dog got up on the counter, they counter surf, and she just ate the top off of it. And she's like, no.
It was so far away, like on the stove, like it wasn't on the first
burner. It was on the back burner.
It was on the back burner. And I was like, "There's no way." And I was like saying to him,
"Yeah."
Like,
She was grabbing the dog by the paws, putting it up on the counter, saying, "See, she cannot reach it."
I was so shaken. I was like, "I will not believe you till you show me she can do it." Prove it.
Yeah.
Prove it.
She wanted me to prove it. So I grabbed the dog by the paws and put her paws up there, and she doesn't do anything because she's scared to death because she knows she's not supposed to be up on the counter. She does not do it in front of people. Sky knows not to jump up on that counter when anybody's looking. And
I was still like, even though you showed me like her paws could get up there, like it still wasn't working. I still didn't believe you, and so you ended up.
What I did, I had this. I have my old iPhone and I have my new iPhone, and you can download this app called Mini Thing, and one of them becomes a recorder, and one of them becomes a viewer. So we go into the living room, and we're sitting there, and I'm like, "Be real quiet." and just watch. So we're sitting on the couch, and Sky gets up and walks into the kitchen.
It was so creepy.
And what do you think we saw
On
in the
the
video?
camera.
Her face just popped right up, and she's licking away on the top of that pizza.
On the back burner. I could not believe it. But I can tell you, that is, at least in the last 2 months, that's been the scariest
I
ever
laughed
been.
so hard. So hard.
I was relieved. I was still so shaken. I couldn't laugh. I was only relieved.
Yeah, she was full of relief.
I really
kept
thought
trying
that
to come up.
someone
I
came
kept
in there.
rationalize everything. I
someone
was
was in
like,
the house.
do you think that like one of the maintenance men that have a key came in, ate the top off your pizza,
It was pretty good pizza.
and then walked out and locked the door behind them?
I don't know.
And she would not believe anything.
I thought it was something paranormal, but honestly, my first thought was someone's in the house. That's what I thought.
My first thought was demons, of course.
Whatever.
Or black-eyed children came into the house, ate
don't think
the
it didn't
pizza
cross my
top,
mind.
and then left.
It's in the back of my mind.
Oh, gosh.
All right, that's our...
If you enjoyed that story, you should give us a like and subscribe just for that.
For my...
Hopefully there's more to come.
No, I'm sure there will be. There's tons. I really want to do a personal experience day where we talk about
Our experience.
personal experiences.
Yeah,
Some
of course.
these things. All right, guys. Well, a little bit shorter podcast tonight, but I'd like to keep it around this time.
I think a little over an hour is good. Yeah.
But remember, subscribe. No matter where you're listening, if there's a subscribe button, go ahead and hit it. It helps us tremendously. I would love to see our downloads and our subscribers kind of even go up further with week 2. Gosh, I just still can't believe it's only been a week. It's crazy. Let us know if you liked this. Let us know if you preferred the true crime or the
polls.
conspiracy.
I think the polls help out a lot. I put up a poll for this episode, and I asked them, what do you want to hear? And I said, true crime. You know, I put all 4 of the ones that we go over. Mm-hmm. And it was 4 people voting for 25.
Yeah,
like one of
all
each person voted for each one. I was just like, oh
the
my
people
gosh.
that voted. But definitely, if you don't know where you want to listen to this or you want to try another listening source, go to podiant.com/conspired. It'll take you right to our website. You can see pictures of us. Who wouldn't want that?
Oh, yeah.
Little bios about ourselves. And it'll give you all the different ways to listen to our podcast and previous episodes as well, if this is your first time tuning in. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Again, we'll let you know about what future episode is to come, either on one of our social media platforms.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.